Yo, what's happening? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Johnny Gaz Live. It's just after 9:30. I'm coming to you live from my basement here in Glens Falls, New York. My home. My wife and son sleeping upstairs. For anybody asking, this is not my parents' home. No, I'm happy you guys are here. Welcome back to Johnny Gaz Live. We are here to talk Lions football. Obviously, the big news of the last few days, the Lions hiring new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. We are going to dive into the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the lefts and rights, the happy, the not so happy to that hire. We're going to get into it heavy today, and I want to hear from you guys in chat. I want to know how you're feeling about this hire. Again, we're going to hit it from all angles. I'll give you my opinion. We'll talk about how it affects the Lions and what this could mean for their future offensively and overall. So it's going to be a good night. We got a lot in front of us. What up, Trim? What up, Mile Marker? Appreciate you guys getting involved in the chat early. Hope you guys are doing well on this Tuesday evening. Happy Tuesday and welcome to Johnny Gaz Live. Make sure to slap the like button, share the stream out there. Let's get it out there early so we can get our friends and family and everybody who wants to talk Lions football involved in this awesome live session. I appreciate you guys so much for all the chat, all the engagement, all the help you've given to me in getting Johnny Gaz Sports off the ground. These lives are now rolling Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Tuesdays, we go heavy on Lions, and then Thursdays, we typically go around the Detroit sports scene, but we are always hitting those news and updates for Detroit sports in every live session. Today, obviously, the big news with the Detroit Lions is the hiring of new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, a name that did not appear on a lot of the lists, a lot of the media sources, a lot of the radio talk shows. You just didn't hear this name, and I think that may have been the ultimate surprise to a lot of Lions fans out there, is that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes went outside of what we thought would happen and seemed to go get a guy that has some ties to the Lions organization. Seem to go get a guy that has some schemes that seem to fit what the Lions are trying to do and what may fit some of what already exists in this roster. Drew Petzing coming from the Arizona Cardinals. And I think that's another part of this, is that a lot of fans have issue with where he's coming from and the success that particular team and organization had overall over the last several years. Jesse brings up a great point. Breaking news, and I did just see this on Facebook. It sounds like Mike McDaniel met with the LA Chargers this evening, and all indications are he will be hired as the next offensive coordinator for the Chargers. So we now know where McDaniel fits in, but of course this news coming after we find out that the Lions went out and hired former offensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals, Drew Petzing. So we're going to get into that heavy, and I would love to hear from you guys in chat. Jesse, welcome to the stream. Thank you for updating us with that information. It is good to have that out there. McDaniel will now be the offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers. Not a huge surprise. I think that's a good place for him to end up. He's going from one quarterback, Tua, to another quarterback in the same draft, Justin Herbert, but obviously a better situation, I think, under center there. So I do think things will be fit for him in LA. But going back to the Drew Petzing hiring, and that's what's getting a lot of fans worked up here over the last several days. I myself came out with content in reaction to the Drew Petzing hiring. My angle ultimately was that for this to be the hire, for the Lions to go and get a guy that was outside of what we thought would happen, a guy we really didn't hear about until the hire took place, somebody who wasn't really in that list of characters that we thought the Lions might bring in. But obviously the Lions have their own plan. This organization, this regime has sort of worked that way since they took over. Brad Holmes has sort of always carried the we know best attitude, and this seems to be another hire in that same realm. A Lions hire, a fit type of hire with a lot of upside now that we look into this a little bit deeper. And again, my angle coming out of this reaction was that ultimately, if this is the move that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are going to make, it has to work. Now, we know the Lions had to have a new offensive coordinator. They have to make some adjustments on the offensive line. and get this offense back to where it was when it was being run by Ben Johnson. Well, Drew Petzing has ties directly with Ben Johnson. Back in the days where they went to Boston College, he was actually a groomsman in Ben Johnson's wedding. So they have a lot of personal familiarity there. And you have to imagine through Ben Johnson's time with the Lions, he had to get the organization familiar with Drew Petzing and what he could do. There's also ties with Petzing when his time with Minnesota had taken place. That's where Hank Fraley had spent some time, the Lions' current offensive line coach. So you see there is a lot of ties for Drew Petzing and this current Lions regime. So it fits the bill for them going out to get their guy. But in doing so, I truly believe that now they've put themselves in a situation where this just has to work. Let's compare that to, let's say, the McDaniel hiring. Now, we know he's now going to the Chargers, but if he had come to the Lions, we know he's sort of his own man. He'd bring his own sense to the offense and really be the captain of the ship when it comes to running the offense, which would hopefully take Dan Campbell's hand off of it. And that's what we've really wanted here. That's what I've said needs to happen for this Lions team to get back to where they were. With Dan Campbell as the CEO, you have the play caller that controls the offense and a defensive coordinator that you trust. And I believe that with McDaniel, you'd have more opportunity to relinquish the offense in whole. Keep Dan Campbell off of it. Well, with this hire, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. That's not a bad thing. That doesn't automatically disqualify Petzing as a bad hire or that it's not going to work out. Because I want this to work out, guys. Let me say that up front. I'm not excited about the move, but that doesn't mean I don't want it to work. I want this Lions offense to shine. They have to retool the offensive line regardless of who they were to bring in. So that's still at the forefront. But I just wanted more of an established, imaginative mind. But that doesn't mean we're not necessarily getting that with Drew Petzing. A lot of media sources, a lot of experts have come out now after some time, and this is all sunk in, to really dig their teeth into what he may bring to the Lions. But I appreciate you guys. We got a lot of people in chat. I'll try to hit you all up with any questions, concerns you have. Johnny L., I don't know about anything about this OC we hired, so I guess we're just going to sit back and watch and see what happens. And Johnny L., that's what we're going to have to do, because we really didn't know a lot about Drew Petzing before this hire was made. So now we're in the mad scramble mode to figure out why, how does this work for the future? And we're going to talk about all of it today. Millicent, how you doing? Good to see Millicent in the chat. Here. I'm very excited about Petzing. I was in the minority of not wanting McDaniel. And yes, there's been positive side to the fan base in this. There's been negative side to the fan base in this. It's very polarizing. I'll be honest with you. I got a lot of slack coming off of my short today where I just tried to give the reality of the situation. I tried to lay the news out as it was. The Lions made an outside hire compared to who we thought they may bring in, all of the names that they told us they were hiring or interviewing as part of the process. Well, they went outside of that. And now I think it puts them in a situation where they've hired their guy yet again. And this has to work or it falls back on Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. Robert, what up, dude? Says, yo, what's good? I'm puzzled about the backlash against Petzing. Ben Johnson was a nobody before DC hired him. Don't see the difference here. You make a good point, Robert. That's very true. That's very true. Not a lot of folks could sit back and tell you anything about Ben Johnson when that came to fruition. When he was then made the offensive coordinator, you had a lot of the same complaints back then. So only time will tell, truthfully, and there's no doubt that there is a lot of upside to where Petzing will now fit into. Jesse says, I believe, in my opinion, DC did not hire McDaniel because he wasn't a yes man. Also, I feel DC was perhaps scared that McDaniel could replace him as head coach in the future. Please also note to bring in Ben Johnson's best friend is wild to me. It is. I mean, obviously there's that connection there. You know, I think we've now found out that the Lions felt McDaniel wasn't a good fit. I think the type of offense that he wanted to run is different from what Petzing will bring him, and a lot of the schemes, and we'll touch on that here today, with what Petzing will bring to the offense seems to fit what the Lions already have on the roster and what they've already been trying to do in years past versus McDaniel, who is very creative, imaginative, adjusts on the fly, uses what is working in the moment, whereas the Lions are more by the book, organizational. They want things to work. They want to build from within. They want to build from the offensive line, this rushing attack. They want to run heavy schemes, and we're going to talk about how Petzing brings that to the Lions. What's up, Theo? How you doing? Good to see you. The gong. That's right. That's right, Millicent. We always got the gong for you. Jeff says, I didn't want McDork. I like that. Millicent says, my initial reaction was, how interesting. Then I spent quite a bit of time on the Arizona Cardinals website, beginning reading Petz's bio. Impressive. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of history, obviously, in football. So the one thing we did talk about while the Lions were searching for an offensive coordinator is they need to find a guy with experience. And with Petzing, you are going to get that. Obviously, an offensive coordinator, so he has years of experience as an OC in Arizona. A lot of experience with good organizations. He was under Stefanski for a while. He was with the Minnesota regime, and we know how those organizations run. Those are good football minds, and he's coming from that pedigree. Now, during his 3 seasons in Arizona, Petzing's offense produced some mixed results. In 2023, Arizona ranked 24th in points scored, but had a very strong run game, finishing 4th in rushing yards and 2nd in yards per carry. In 2024, the Cardinals' offense improved, ranking 12th in scoring with a healthier roster. But in 2025, things kind of fell apart because of the health and injury concerns. The Cardinals finished 23rd in points, again, struggling with injuries and some inconsistency there. But ultimately, it's shown that Petzing's Cardinals would excel on the ground in the right scenario with the right talent mix, especially early in his tenure with the Cardinals, with O'Connor, the running back there. And then with the quarterback situation he had last year, they still were able to produce some numbers. So although it is a conservative hire, it may be the smart hire in essence with what schemes he's going to bring to the Lions and what he may be able to work out with the current roster. His strength in building the run game and then working with tight ends. Trey McBride has turned himself into one of, if not the best tight end in football. Now you're putting Petzing in a situation with one of the best tight ends already in football, Sam Laporta. Now we know he has some injury concerns, and we also know the Lions will have to add tight ends this offseason. Petzing runs a tight end heavy scheme, these 11, 12, and even 13 formations that we're now hearing about, 13 heavy formations with 3 tight ends on the field at the same time. Well, no, you know you have Sam Laporta, but you're going to have to find other options to kind of fit and run this scheme. But I do think it sort of fits the power rushing attack and what the Lions really want to do long term. What's up, Danny? How you doing? Danny Painter in the house. Appreciate you. I'm liking the hiring of this OC. But I guess that what we don't know is how it will go. But if it was me, I would have taken Daniel over with these ones. Danny, I won't lie. That's where I was at. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys and pretend, oh, Petzing, I knew it the whole time. I wanted McDaniel. I wanted the established guy that would come in and completely take over the offense. Allow Dan Campbell to relinquish all of that offensive duty and get back to being the CEO. So that's where I was coming from. But we don't know that Petzing won't be able to do the same thing. He has the experience, and it seems like the Lions have some trust in him based on what he was doing in Arizona. Don't know Grits in the house. Appreciate you, buddy. How you doing? Joined us last week on Tuesday. We'll have you back very soon, pal. He says, I like Petzing's experience as a position coach. He's worked with quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs. And man, does he have a good mix of that in Detroit. There's no hiding the fact that the Lions have leaps and bounds a better roster than Arizona ever had in his time there. So he's coming into a situation where he will have all the tools at his disposal. We know the Lions have to remix their offensive line and figure out what they're doing, especially on the interior. But if they can get some of those pieces solved, it's putting Petzing in his best situation professionally. I think the question is the creativity, the adaptability. How does he fit in with this current roster? It doesn't just automatically mean that that scheme works. You have to be able to adapt and evolve. And that's really the question. And you felt like some of the other names on that list would be better suited to do that. But the Lions feel like Drew Petzing is the guy to take them forward offensively, and that's the route they took. Don't know was against McDaniel from the jump. I'll give you credit for that, my brother. And it sounds like with the breaking news this evening, he's going to get the offensive coordinator job with the Chargers. So McDaniel ends up in LA with Justin Herbert. It will be interesting to see how he molds that offense. They also have a ton of offensive line issues like the Lions. Jesse says, in my opinion, also, can we say any team was looking at this guy? So why were no reports of an interview / whichever and then hire him so fast? ? I believe this guy would have been available 30 days from now after more interviews. That's a question. It's a fair question, Jesse. But I will say the Lions had said they wanted to make this happen sooner than later. I think with what they want to do with the rest of their offseason program, it would benefit them to hire quickly. I think the shocking thing is it's just a guy that nobody expected, and it wasn't on a lot of people's radar. But again, according to a lot of folks, he's respected within the NFL. He's been a part of a lot of good systems. And one thing I want to do here, guys, is look at both the pros and cons, in my opinion, or from my perspective, for this hiring of Drew Petzing for the Detroit Lions. So let's dive into it. One of the things we've already touched on, a pro in this case, is the alignment with the Lions' philosophy. His offense emphasizes a strong rushing attack, a disciplined approach, and that's what the Lions have always been. Is their base is an offensive line and the ability to run the football in the worst case scenarios, to eat clock, to maintain possession. It is so important. So Drew Petzing is coming in with a similar philosophy and able to build a strong rushing attack. Think about what he might be able to do with a retooled offensive line with who exists currently there and Jahmyr Gibbs at his disposal. I think versatility, the breadth of his coaching experience will help in this scenario. He's coached multiple offensive positions. Like Don't Know Grit just said, he has experience with quarterbacks, with wide receivers. He's made tight ends in this league already. So that is a surefire benefit to him joining this current Lions roster. And we talked about Trey McBride's surgence as far as becoming one of the best tight ends in football, and that can be tied to his scheme, to Drew Petzing's scheme with the Cardinals, and that's on top of a lot of other inefficiencies offensively. So to be able to make that happen, I think will be a benefit for the Lions, especially Sam Laporta when he's back and healthy. Now, again, I think the Lions will have to make some efforts to add tight ends, figure out either through free agency or the draft how to add to that group, because it sounds like Petzing will be very tight end heavy, and that could benefit what the Lions are trying to do. And then lastly, it's just his experience. He's coming from the Cardinals. He has direct offensive coordinator experience, a guy that you can trust to hopefully take over the operation. Now, will that be more effective than, let's say, a McDaniel would have been in this same system? We'll never know. But ideally, in my opinion, if Dan Campbell can relinquish the offensive duties and become that CEO, the leader of the operations for the Lions, allow Drew Petzing to take over the offense, use the roster to the best of their abilities, that's the ultimate solution here. If they can work towards that, I think the Lions are on a good path. Cheers. What's up, Paul? How you doing, buddy? Paul says, if it was up to the Madden GMs, we'd have Curly Lambeau as coach and $70 trillion over the cap. We want cohesion over hype. I agree, Paul. This just has to work. Right? Flash means nothing if it doesn't work. I agree with you. Appreciate you sharing the stream, Robert. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. We're going to be talking about the OC hire all night long. We're going to dive into the divisional round playoffs, talk about how that relates to the Lions and the lessons we can take from that. But right now we are knee-deep in Drew Petzing. Jesse Spence says, Cardinal fans / writers hate this guy. I've seen a good mix of that. I would say it's probably shaded a little more negative from Arizona's perspective. But you got to take that with a grain of salt, right? Arizona has struggled over the last several years, record-wise. They've been hurt with injuries, and now they're letting go of their offensive play caller, who a lot of Cardinals fans will point the finger at. So to them, you understand why they wouldn't like that guy leaving. It's like the John Morton situation from the Lions, right? How would Lions fans speak about John Morton joining another organization? Millicent says, we are fans and not a part of any NFL organization to know what conversations are had. You're right. We don't know. I mean, obviously they could have been mapping this out mid-season, Millicent, for all we know. After Campbell took over the play calling from Morton, they could have already been making backhanded contacts with Petzing or his people. I mean, we don't know. And obviously with the ties, we talked about the Ben Johnson tie, the Hank Fraley tie. So there was familiarity there. So they clearly had connections. Theo says, I love attacking with Sonic and Knuckles. Focus still on protection and run blocking. Scheme can only succeed with Trent's strength. We are in the give him a chance to show what he brings stance. I'm with you, Theo. That's fair. That has to be fair. And that's what the Lions want to do. The question will be, does Drew Petzing want to keep Knuckles? Because remember what Brad Holmes had come out and said. A lot of the indication was they were going to maybe try to move on from Knuckles or find him a better location. Well, will Drew Petzing feel differently about that? With his run-heavy attack, and we know the Lions are at their best when both Sonic and Knuckles are getting a share of the touches. So I wonder if that changes some things, Theo. Jesse says, I just feel bad for Tesla. Yeah, I mean, the scheme-wise, it doesn't fit what he could do in previous Lions schemes. But I think there's still a place for Tesla. I mean, he proved that he's a red zone target, and that's vital even in the schemes that we've just described. In 11-12 personnel, you could still find a way to use Isaac Tesla. I think what I feel worse about is the fact we've given away draft picks that we now could have used to help this scheme or help him reform the offense. But I like Tesla. I really do. I don't mean to knock the kid at all. I like the player. Theo says, I believe our tight ends coach is left. And yes, Roll. He went to, I think he took one of the college jobs. He worked with Petzing, and McBride is available. Is McBride available? Is he really? I should have known that. I apologize. I don't have that information. I would imagine McBride is going, if he is available, if that is true, would demand obviously high-priced tight end dollar. I don't think the Lions are in that mix, especially with all the other holes they have, but they're going to have to add tight ends, no doubt. Trim says Kyle Pitts or Tyler Conklin, a good fit. Now, there's names that make a lot more sense, Trim. Make a lot more sense because I think the dollar amount would make sense. Free agent makes a little more sense to me for the Lions because, one, they're limited on their draft picks, and they got to remake their offensive line. So to use draft picks on tight ends, I don't know if that would be smart. So those two names I like. Milton says, side note, Petzing reminds me of a cross between Uncle Fester and Boss Baby. I like that. I've heard Boss Baby a little bit, so that's good. That deserves. I definitely deserve the Millicent song. That's good stuff. Jeff says, let's go back. Jeff says, I think Dan pushed honestly pressures on Brad to feel line, add an edge, deep safety draft. Brad better spend to get a center. I mean, again, I think this puts the hiring of Drew Petzing puts everybody now in a situation where they got to make the necessary moves to make this work. Because if it doesn't work, and I know I've said this already, and it was in my short today, if it doesn't work, it puts Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell on the hot seat, more so than if McDaniel had been hired. Because if a McDaniel comes in and it doesn't work, they could certainly point the finger to, crazy McDaniel or that, hey, we tried it. We took a shot. That's what everybody wanted us to do. And that wasn't it for this. I think they could have leaned back on that. Not that we wanted any of that to happen. And that may be worst case scenario. But I think Dan and Brad could save their jobs more so in that situation versus now. If Drew Petzing, a guy that they pecked out of nowhere, basically. I mean, Petzing has experience, but I just mean out of nowhere compared to the other names we thought were in the mix. Now they have to make this work. So what are the other moves that they're willing to do to make this work? That's really the question. Paul says we should get Steele as tight end coach from Arizona. Okay. So maybe the connection's there. And I wonder if they do pluck anybody else in that case. Does Petzing have influence over some staff? You could see some assistants and people come over in that situation. That could be one of them. That's a good call, Detroit fan, man. I like that a lot. But actually, how you doing, buddy? Says the Arizona tight end coach is former TE Ben Steele, nicknamed America's TE coach somehow. Well, bring him on. We need him. Let's go. Jesse says, after this new hire, I sure hope we draft an offensive line guy in the first round to help with the rush. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's the thing. regardless of what offensive coordinator they brought in, that doesn't change the fact the Lions have to retool the offensive line. And if they don't do that successfully, it would hinder the offensive coordinator no matter who it is. Alistair Crowley looking at me, Petzing. Nice. Good job, Trem. Pitts is a better version of Zylstra. Don't know Grit. Nice comment. I like that. I like Pitt's size. I like what he could bring. More athletic. I like that idea. That's certainly, I wonder what the cost would be. So that's really what it comes down to. We'll have to look into that. Maybe me and you, Grit, could get into that in a future episode. Johnny Yell says, I really think this guy might just be what we need. Maybe it is. And again, the point was brought up earlier. A lot of people didn't know who Ben Johnson was when he was hired. And that worked out for the best. And this guy is in a similar mold. I'm not going to say the same mold, but a similar mold. Milson says, I can't wait to hear what Amon-Ra thinks of Petzing on his podcast tomorrow. I know his brother Equal will ask the question. Yeah, they're not afraid to say the things that you don't think they're going to say. I was listening to one of their recent podcasts, and they were talking about the moves the Lions should or shouldn't make this offseason. And Amon-Ra had made the comment after EQ had said, I hope you guys are aggressive in free agency. I really want to see you add some pieces. And I think the quote from Amon-Ra St. Brown was, me and you both. That's what he said, me and you both. So that tells me that he wants the organization to add the necessary pieces. Maybe Drew Petzing is one of them. Taysom Hill, tight end from New Orleans. I would not bring in Taysom Hill to be a tight end here. I like Taysom Hill for his guts and everything he's done in that New Orleans system, but I don't know if that works elsewhere. And he's getting towards the back end of his career. Jesse says, I'll be back. I'm a subscriber to your YouTube. I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't already, it is completely free to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or to join the family on Facebook, Johnny Gaz Sports. Of course, there's memberships on each one for a small nominal fee where I come out with a ton of fun content, but there is always free stuff for you here, including these lives on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to slap the like button. It's the best free way to help me out today. And if you haven't already, share it out there. Let's get your friends and family involved. Let's talk some Lions. Let's figure out what's going to happen with this new offensive coordinator hire. So we talked about the pros. I do want to hit on the cons. And I don't mean to focus on this, but we do need to look at the reality of the situation. And as much pro as we can bring to this, I want to look at the other side. He's had limited sustained success. That's clear as far as winning and losing with the Arizona program. Now, you could attribute a lot of that to other factors within that Arizona organization. Injuries were a huge factor this last year. Not having a quarterback, obviously, in comparison to what the Lions have. So that all plays a huge factor, but he's coming from a situation with very limited success and experience in deep playoff runs. Is there predictability concerns? I mean, he comes from this Ben Johnson similar mold, but does he really have the same Ben Johnson strategy and scheme and ability to draw up plays in critical situations that will ultimately lead the Lions to victories? There's really no telltale on how he'll react with our current roster. You're now handing a guy who hasn't had a Cadillac, or let me say that differently. You're now handing a guy that's been driving a Pinto a Cadillac. And does he know how to open that bad boy up? You can't just assume. There's a lot of shifting. There's a lot of scheming that has to happen to fit the pieces into place correctly. And so that will be proven in time, and that we have to give him time. And the last thing is the fact that it was truly under the radar. And this may be truly from a fan perspective. People worried about the Lions passing on a higher profile option that may have brought a more innovative, maybe more control of an offense. And if he doesn't have full control of this Lions offense, meaning if Dan Campbell still has his hand over the process, are we really taking the next step here in 2026? Does this ultimately give the Lions organization their best structure? And again, we won't know till we see it. But I think a lot of Lions fans, including myself, felt like other options could have been available to solidify that right away. And now we're in a situation where we have to wait, and that's okay. Yeah, Jesse, I'm live on YouTube, live on Facebook. Both sources, we'd go at the same time. Absolutely, buddy. Mark Daly, how you doing, buddy? Let's bring in this perspective. He says, this is a full-blown mistake. Guy failed in Arizona. Dan blew it running off McDaniel because he wanted control more than he wanted to win. And there's that argument. I literally just went there, Mark. So you're not off base. I've heard a lot of Lions fans there today. That was my honest, true gut reaction when I heard of the hire. I felt like, okay, here's a guy that the Lions will have full control over. And does that fix their issue? We don't know. Are there any injury-prone tight ends available, according to Trim? You know they love their injury-prone guys. We're going to go to that hospital market bed and just start signing guys. You know what I mean? Mark's very on the stance if he will fail because it already happened. So, Mark, do you put any emphasis into the roster he had in Arizona, the other coaches that surrounded him there, the fact that he never really had a quarterback, sustained quarterback, and when he did in 2023 and 24, the offense was actually okay. So is there any part of you that feels like with now the Lions roster, the opportunity that he may have with this talent base, that he could improve? Jeff says, bye, Brad. Thanks for the drafts. Outsmarted yourself. Oof. Ouch. What's up, Michelle? Says, if he ends up taking control like BJ did, not such a bad thing. And that's really the hope, right? That is the true hope of this, is that this is a guy that's now worked his way through good systems, good organizations. He's had time to build his experience. Yes, he didn't have ultimate success with Arizona, but has now the experience to join a team that's set up to win. And if he can take control like Ben Johnson did, be this innovative mind that we're sort of hearing, take Dan Campbell's hand off of the offensive side of the football, then I think you are in the exact situation you wanted to be in, Michelle. That's the high upside to this, for sure. Jay Cruiser says, I drank 2 pouches of hand sanitizers in the ER bathroom. Not proud. Hey, buddy, not good. But I hope you're okay. I hope that's a joke. But we're here for you, buddy. We're here for you. Trim says, really hope Demo stays now. There's a shot of that. There's a shot. I'd love to hear when we finally get to hear Drew Petzing speak or what the organization will say. I'm very curious on what the David Montgomery situation will be. Don't know gives us great stats. Let's bring this in. Jacoby Brissett threw for 3,300 plus yards and 23 TDs in 14 games under Drew. He wasn't all bad in Arizona. And no, that's credit to Drew there. And that system to get something out of Brissett, all the other injuries they had, they also were hurt on their offensive line. So that's a really good point. Mark says, the only concession I'll make, Kyler isn't an NFL quarterback, and maybe he'll be better with Goff, but I hate settling for a maybe when there was a sure thing for the taking. And again, that's the argument, right? Is you felt like some more experience, some more surefire hires could have been there. We don't really know. We won't know. But in our minds, that could have been there, and they went the other direction. Yeah, Johnny L., I think you're right. And you're already starting to feel that now. I think it's just that they're building a winner. I heard Calvin Johnson say, going back to the Amon-Ra St. Brown podcast, I heard Calvin Johnson say the Lions roster and where they're at right now, they are in that Super Bowl window. So the time is now. And Johnny L., I think a lot of Lions fans are feeling that. So when a certain fan feels like they didn't make the necessary move or didn't go out and take what could have been theirs to get to the next level, people get upset. And you're feeling that for sure. Chose the wrong day to stop drinking and sniffing glue. Trim, give it a couple weeks, man. I'll shoot you a couple packs of Elmer's if I got to, buddy. MCD was just as handicapped by personnel and did more with less. Fair. I mean, that offense in Miami was rolling at certain times. Kevin brings up one of our biggest points here of the day. It's a great point, Kevin. Welcome to the chat. Says, if they don't fix the O-line, it won't matter who's calling the plays. That is the best point of the day so far, my man. McDaniel, Kafka, Petzing. They have to fix the O-line. It all starts there, especially with Petzing and what I think he wants to run. These 11, 12, 13 personnel sets, well, you got to have a solid offensive line to do any of that. 13 different offensive linemen in Arizona this season. That is ridiculous. Don't know. I mean, so give him a little bit of a credit for that alone. You guys are hilarious. You're absolutely right, Mark. Mark, you're absolutely right. You're right. We can't stand ground. I can't sit here and stand ground or just say, oh, you got to give Drew Petzing a pass because of all the injuries there, because you're absolutely right. And you can make the argument for Morton or things that happen with Shep on the defense. Injuries are a deterrent, but they're not the factor that should switch things around to that extent. So I agree with you. Michelle says the new OC will the new OC will have say on Montgomery and the rest of the roster, wouldn't you think? I would hope so. I mean, Brad seemed very sure that they were going to allow David to find something better. And I don't know if that meant because of price. I don't know if that meant because they want to get cap space back, restructure, if they really just see Gibbs as the ultimate solution. But I do. I think that Petzing will have a lot of say in what ultimately happens with that. I hope he does. Johnny Sports, a brother. Johnny Gaz, what up? Jake Ruzin, I appreciate you just being here, bro. Stick around. We like you. Yeah, the Morton and Anthony Lynn argument is hard. You can't work around that, Mark. They are what they are. This is going to be the thing. This is the make or break for this regime now. This is what they've chosen to do with this hire. And if it works out, then we are sitting pretty. Yeah, Paul. Yeah, great point. We did break the news earlier as we just opened up the live. McDaniel was hired by the Chargers, or all indications are he's being hired by the Chargers. He met with them today. Seemed to tell the other organizations he met with he wasn't going to be joining them, so that would mean he's staying there. Detroit Fan Man says the hire McDaniel crowd is not going to like him taking the Chargers OC job. Now we have another team to measure against. I agree. I think the one thing I'm going to look into with this is how did the Chargers rebuild their offensive line compared to how do the Lions rebuild theirs? Because both those organizations are in similar spots across their offensive lines. The Chargers don't have a Penei Sewell, though, but they have some talent, but they need to remake their own. So what team is able to do that quicker and then have the success they're looking to have with their lines? Rob says we need to sit back and stay positive. I'm here for it, Rob. I don't want to sit here and blow the negative smoke at everybody. That's not my goal here. I really try to give the reality of the situation. I think that Drew Petzing has a pedigree and scheme that can fit what this Lions roster and what Dan and Brad are trying to do. I really do. Don't know says, I think this hire is easy for me to accept since I was one of the few who did not want McDaniel. In fact, I kind of hoped they would get Stefanski instead. They got somebody from his tree. So that's a good point. Yeah, Petzing was under Stefanski, worked with the quarterbacks at the time, I believe, in the organization. So he's coming from a lot of good offensive minds. And at a time with Minnesota, was it Norv Turner? And then obviously the new coach when he got hired in there. So a lot of good experience within the NFL. Jay Cruz says, when Petzing sees Ben Johnson's playbook, it's literally Drew Trumwriter. I like it. Paul Jones says they'll more than likely offer Monty a backup salary and let him shop around. I think remember, so they have to trade him. So, they literally have to execute a trade to move on from Monty. I would rather they just pay him, or adjust his year salary, or figure out how to base his contract on incentives so it saves you the cap space, and just hold on to him for this year. Figure it out. I think Monty wants to stay. I'm agree with you, Millicent. I'm there. Jesse says, I hope Monty stays. For now, knowing who this guy is and learning his history, with him and Ben being part of Boston College, moving forward to today, I strongly feel perhaps this is B. Johnson 2.0. As he knows B. Johnson's game, especially how the Cardinals rushing were top 5 and top 10 under this guy. He had good years with that rushing attack with the Cardinals. Yes. Now, he also had some other assistant coaches there that some folks are attributing that success. I don't have the name off the top of my head, but there was a rushing game coordinator that moved from Arizona to Dallas while Petzing was in Arizona. And after that move, not only did the Arizona Cardinals rushing attack fall off, but the Dallas rushing attack went from like 26th in the NFL to 9th in the NFL. So it's a small sample size, but it just shows that a lot of pieces have to come together. And potentially that means that Drew Petzing joining the pieces that are currently here could form that magic formula that we're looking for. So again, trying to stay positive. There are pieces here, which would include offensive line coach Hank Fraley, which he has that relationship with, that would indicate that they can make this thing work. And not only work, but flourish, especially with that rushing attack. Yeah, Michelle, we got a long off season. We got so long to get into this and figure out what they're going to do. Obviously, with their free agents, with the Monty situation, we got the draft we're going to have to worry about. So we're going to be doing a lot of mock drafts. I'm kind of glad the Lions get this hire because now we'll hear from them. We'll figure out kind of what the strategy is, hopefully, so that when we do go into these mock drafts, we'll have a better idea of how they'll look at this. Mark says, I love Gibbs, but Gibbs Monty's better than Gibbs alone. Agreed, 1,000%. Morton underutilized him, and so did Dan. I want him back, but I think Brad wants him gone so we can save some cap space. I think I feel that way as well, but I wonder again if this changes some things. Kind of thought the Chargers O-line had two dogs on IR. That's what I mean. Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, strong right. So they need to, so they need obviously injury recovery, similar to the Lions situation on other aspects, but they ultimately going to have to add some pieces. So with their injury recovery, can they, I'd probably through the draft. My guess is in their situation, they're probably drafting young offensive linemen to help retool. But again, I'm very curious to see how quickly they can turn these things around. Chargers are going to be dangerous when the tackles heal. Looking forward to Harbaugh Bowl rematch. Yeah, there you go. That's going to be great. You got New York versus LA. Paul says, our roster is so loaded that Dan's play calling earned them a top 10 offense. Yeah, I mean, there's still arguments to be made there that even with Dan Campbell as the play caller, I mean, they were still doing good things statistically offensively. I think it was just inconsistent and it would fall off at the wrong times. Obviously, those few late losses, there just wasn't enough splash. I know people love that word to their offense at times. Joe Alt is absolutely a stud. Don't know says, I think if they restructure, they could save about $2 million on Demo's contract. What's up, Jason Fuller? How you doing? So on offense, we could lose Decker, Skipper, Zylstra, Glasgow, Awasika, and Cologne, with Laporta and Wright injured for how long, we don't know. So what offensive line is left besides Sewell? Well, you're right, Jason. I mean, that's a huge question. I mean, and if they don't rebuild the offensive line, then the OC hire doesn't really matter. I mean, I think they have a lot of faith in Ratledge, obviously on the right side, and whether or not he moves to center or stays at guard, he's going to be a part of the offensive line for the future. And then they have options with Mahogany and then Frazier on the left guard side. So again, is it the ultimate solution? Only time will tell, but they have pieces there for the interior. It's really about how they're going to handle the center position. Does Decker retire? And then how do they look to fill the open spots? So I think they're looking to draft both a tackle and either a guard center, depending on what they do with Ratledge. Thank you, don't know. Clayton Adams. That was the name I was looking for. You are always on point. Clayton Adams was the offensive assistant, the run game coordinator I'm referring to, that worked with Petzing in Arizona, that is attributed to a lot of that rush game success. He left Arizona, went to Dallas and revamped their offensive scheme. And guess what happened with Arizona's rushing attack? There was some other things that played a factor in that too, but that's the name. Thank you, Clayton Adams. Don't know Grit coming up huge. What happens if Monty leaves and Gibbs get hurt? That's the big problem right there, Mark. Because it also puts the Lions in a situation where they got to go get another running back. If there's no Monty, who's the backup? Craig Reynolds is gone. Jacob Saylors is not the option there. So, like, they're being in the market for another running back if there's no Monty. Michelle says, pay him. We know his potential. I'm not willing to roll the dice. I agree. I don't want to bring in somebody else. I think the other option is that they draft. Think of Kyle Monungai with the Bears, right? He was a late round draft pick, but that really paid off for them. I think that's what the Lions would want to do if they move on from Monty, something like that. Trim says, since liking and subscribing to Johnny Gaz Sports, my sex life has drastically improved. See what it can do for yours. Now, I'm still waiting on the scientific testing from that to come back, but it's working for Trim. It could work for you. I appreciate you, man. You're the best. Don't know says, but with the Clayton Adams argument, is causation versus correlation? Yes, he's left, but they also had to go with 11 different offensive lines. That's it. That's it. There were a lot of other factors. I'm not going to only contribute it there, but I want to give the entire picture. That's honestly don't know what I really try to do here with Johnny Gaz Sports. Yes, I'll give you my opinion, but first and foremost, I want to lay out the facts. What is it? How is it? Why is it? What can it be? Right? There's been talk about Ben Steele perhaps following Petzing to Detroit. Thoughts? We just hit on that. I think that would be, we're probably going to hear a lot of assistant coaches being now plucked from that organization because of this move, and I would love if Ben Steele was a part of that. A lot of holes, very little cap space, weakened draft capital, Mark. You're right, but the restructure is going to be very key. Now, if you honestly look at the way they can restructure some of the bigger contracts, Jared Goff alone could save the organization $30-40 million annually. So there is a lot of movement that they can make, and we expect that to be the case so that they have some cap space. Yeah, don't sleep on Frazier. The kid was a steal, in my opinion, and he was hurt. He barely scratched the surface and got some PT at the end of the season there when the Lions were honestly struggling. So I'm excited as well, don't know, to see what he can bring with a little bit of a healthier offensive line, and then when they start to add these few pieces that we're talking about. Theo says, unfortunately, statistics are empty without the wins to go with them. I guess the argument, Theo, in return is that if those statistics can correlate from Arizona to Detroit, that the roster and the surrounding situation will lead itself or lend itself to more victories. So I do agree with you that those stats don't mean anything in a sense of what will you do for us now, but it's a track record of things that he has been able to do with a roster that is nowhere near what the Lions have. Scott Bellagio in the house. How you doing, Scott? Says the Detroit Lions had 3 times to go all the way and bring Detroit a trilogy of 3 Super Bowls, but failed. So much money that Mrs. Ford invested in players, but did not accomplish the mission. Scott, entering this 2026 season, I'm with you. I want them to do the necessary things to bring this organization a Super Bowl. Long-term success sounds good. But if you find me in 5 years and they haven't gotten to or won a Super Bowl, I'm going to tell you that this whole thing was a failure. That's just my opinion, but that's where I'm at. Mark says, better if Ratledge stays at guard. If he goes to center, it's a rookie year all over again. That's a good point. Frazier and Mahogany are already repeating rookie years because they were hurt all year long. I tend to lean in that way as well, Mark. Now, it depends on what the organization sees with Ratledge. It did give him a little time last preseason to try out center, and they ultimately went with Glasgow and him over at right. But I think he fits better as a right guard, and I'd love to see the Lions just draft the center that they want, or even better than that, and I don't know how realistic this is to go out and get Linderbaum. But it sounds like the Giants are going to make a play for him as well. So let's see what happens there. Michelle's out. She says, peace. Hope you all figure it out. Scott says, I'm 61 and I wonder if I will see the Lions win before God calls me. Scott, that's a fair concern. I feel for you. I am 40 years old and I wonder the same thing sometimes. But obviously you have lived it a lot longer than I have. So I respect you and I hope the same for you. I do. Jesse said, I heard this on the radio. If you knew 100% Decker is back next season, do you look at an offensive lineman in the first round? I would say, Jesse, in my opinion, if Decker is back, then you have a lot more options in the first round. And no, you don't necessarily have to go offensive lineman there. I would say that I would lean that direction if Decker is a guaranteed return. But if he's not, or if there's any waffling, you take it. You take the offensive lineman that fits or fills the need there to replace Decker. Don't wait. Don't put yourself in a Ragnow situation, right? Paul Jones says, Gaz Sports cures gout. Man, I got to get those prescription bottles updated, Paul. I really do. Rob says, we need to keep Anzalone so we can use money for cap space. think that's what you're getting at. We need to keep Alex Anzalone. It's funny. I thought Anzalone was a for sure see you later candidate, but now I'm starting to get some word from the camp as well as from Anzalone's social media that maybe they've already worked something out. Maybe it's another small 1-year deal, incentive based. I think he likes Detroit. I think he likes having the family here. He doesn't want to move, I don't think. So if they can work it out, maybe they do. It would also help them not have to necessarily go draft heavy with another linebacker. Mark says, new tackle center, let Frazier Mahogany battle for the other guard spot, fixes the line if we can get the right guy. I love that. Detroit Fan Man says, I love seeing people say we just take Tesla, add 35 pounds, and turn him into a tight end. No, we don't. I agree with you. It's not possible. It's just not possible. He's got a lot of tight end like skill set things that he does, but he doesn't have the strength or power to compete. He can do none of what Sam Laporta can do as far as inline blocking, and what they could do with him is formation. So that's like magic 8-ball stuff right there. I'm with you there. I just hope that they don't fade away from using him. I really do believe he's a red zone asset. So I think there's ways to work him in, but then can you justify a 3rd-round pick and everything you gave up for that? I mean, there's a lot of questions there, of course. Guys, there are so many people here in chat. I'm having trouble keeping up. And honestly, bear with me because I'm figuring out now as the more people we get involved, how to basically work through chat. I want to make sure everybody gets heard and you guys have the opportunity to give your opinions and thoughts. More than anything, thank you so much for being involved with Johnny Gaz Sports. I had many other topics I thought we'd get into today, but clearly the hiring of Drew Petzing is at the top of everyone's mind. Mark says, I want to see how they'll address injuries. 2 years in a row, Lions led the league in catastrophic injuries. Can't write that off to bad luck. There is a lot to be said for that, Mark. I mean, they got to figure out strength and conditioning-wise what makes sense for them long-term. I mean, some of it is bad luck, some of it, but there is now consistency and routine to this, so they got to figure out a way to adjust. Tell Ford to replace the turf we have. Yeah, there you go. There's one idea. Millicent, you're right. Why I don't like settling for second best at OC. Yeah, there you go. Millicent says, I think it's time to move on from Decker. I mean, I think to me that's up to Decker. I think the Lions are in a situation whereas if he wants to come back, they're going to need him to come back. I just don't think they want another hole to fill if they don't have to. If Decker's able to give them one more solid good year, they definitely will take it. His body is beat though, Milson. You're right. Maybe he won't even make it through another season. That's the truth. You're right. Trim's coming up with some free agent targets for us. I appreciate that. Again, we'll dive into that in a future episode because that's a huge topic and things that we could open up, and I will have that for you at Johnny Gaz Sports here in the very near future. Another concern is we got 3 great wide receivers, 1 good tight end if healthy, so we're running TE heavy lineup. Well, we can't with what we currently have, Mark. You're right. We're right. We need to add additional tight ends. We talked about some possibilities in free agency. Could they add a late tight end in the draft? They definitely need to add talent there if they're going to run those 11, 12, 13 personnel schemes. Scott says, hey, Johnny, thanks for entertaining my thoughts. I enjoy your commenting and commitment to your channel. I appreciate it, buddy. I really do. And I want to tell you guys, I mean, today was a tough day. I think there's a lot of Lions fans that were very worked up today, including myself. I mean, it was a situation where I was underwhelmed with the hire. I had to do a lot of digging to figure out how does this play into the Lions situation. But I think a lot of people are worked up. And so with me giving my opinion on the fact, there were a lot of folks that just didn't like that today. So I appreciate you guys for being positive and giving me your opinions, and I value that. So let's move on. I appreciate you guys are kind of leaning that way. So why don't we get away from our current Lions topic, and why don't we send ourselves to a new place, a new segment that we introduced on Thursday last week. Let's go around the D. Around the D with Johnny G. We talked about the Lions. We know what's going on there. We could spend weeks on it, but let's dive into the other Detroit sports teams, guys. We got some great stuff going on right now. The Pistons are rolling. On Monday, the Pistons beat the Celtics in what was a playoff-like matchup. A very heavy offensive-based Celtics team comes into Detroit, which we know Detroit's specialty is playing defense, getting after it that way. Let me get the music going for us here. 104-103. The Pistons are able to hold off the Celtics. Jaylen Brown had an opportunity with a last-second shot, but the Pistons defense held their own. They were able to get the stop and come out with the victory there in Little Caesars Arena on Monday. They maintained their position on the top of the East, and the Pistons are rolling. Now, this was a game where Cade Cunningham, you could see, is still struggling with this wrist injury. So offensively, I think he was a lot more standoffish, but in turn, he had one of his best distribution games of the season. 14 assists to 0 turnovers against the Celtics, against a primetime team in a primetime matchup where he knew he wasn't going to be overly effective scoring the basketball. He takes over the game in a different way with 14 assists to 0 turnovers. Talk about leading your team in any aspect. The Lions All-Star the Detroit Pistons All-Star just proving himself in this premier matchup against the Celtics. I watched this entire game from start to finish. I had to record it because it was on at the same time as the national championship game, but I was very impressed with the way the Pistons are able to get after it defensively, the way they're able to utilize the current pieces on their roster. I do think they're still short a scorer, a shooter of the basketball, because when you shorten the bench, when you get towards the playoffs, I really believe they're going to need somebody who can shoot the rock. You can't just have Cade lead the way every single night, but this was a night against the Celtics where he didn't have to do that. And you had Tobias Harris as the leading scorer. I think he had 25 points on the day. Yeah, team high 25 points. Shot the rock well from the three, timely, when they really had to have it. And I thought this was a game that kind of sets the Pistons apart now in the East. This just stamps or proves to the rest of the NBA, at least the Eastern Conference, that they are the class of the East. And really puts them in a great position now for the second half of the year, what's left in this NBA season, to hopefully work themselves towards the number one seed in the playoffs. Yeah, Johnny G in the house says he is the real deal, no doubt. And you're right, don't agree. He was looking to pass first. Cade was not willing to shoot from the outside. Anything he did have from distance was flat, it seemed like. So that wrist is a factor. So he's going to have to allow time. I think the All-Star break is going to be huge for him, although he's going to be heavily involved. But I think he'll take it easy there and hopefully get back to 100% quickly. In this one, Boston's offense looks sharp. Jaylen Brown, I mean, he's an all-star. He finished with 32 points, but I didn't think the Pistons flinched. I really thought they held in there. Defense, clutch execution, did all the right things against a quality opponent. Jalen Duren, 18 points, 9 rebounds. Obviously controls the center of this Pistons offense and defense. And they are all hustle and all grit. And I hate to use that moniker over and over and over again, but that's the vibe I get from this Pistons team. Somebody had told me that they seem to have sort of an 0-4 vibe to them as far as the going to work Pistons were concerned. Now, that was a very special group. We'll have a future episode where we can just hit on that a little bit. That was certainly my big era of Pistons basketball. But the way that they play defense, the way they work for each other, you do have some camaraderie there, the way the bench interacts. There's a good vibe with the Pistons, and I see some good things happening in the future. Jesse says, I'm fine with weaker components in the next week or two. Just let them sit out and heal. He's only missed 5 games of his 17, which is allowed for his bonus. There you go. Detroit Fan Man says, am I alone? This Pistons run kind of feels like what the Tigers just did to us. I mean, we were so dominant before the All-Star game. Oh, they're going to prove it to us, Detroit Fan Man. I think the second half of last year showed that they're on the right trajectory. I don't think they have a major fall off. I really don't, unless for some reason injury bug hits them or something crazy happens. I think they're more in a position to where they now have set themselves up to be at the top of the East for the rest of the year. I really have more of that by myself. But hey, we'll see. We'll continue to hit on this throughout the weeks here and see where they end up. That's where, yeah, Devin. Let's not talk Davenport. Davenport doesn't fit anywhere. And the Lions, Pistons, Red Wings, Tiger, he's just gone. Let's get him out of here. Brent says, first trip to LCA last week was awesome for my grandson's birthday. Atmosphere was electric. Pistons lost to the Clippers, but a great time. Planning a Red Wings trip now. That was that the game, Brent, that Cade had to sit? So they were undermanned that one, unfortunately, against the Clippers, but they've also struggled against the Clippers. They just seem to have their number. But I'm so glad you got to get down there. I have not been to LCA, believe it or not. Again, I live in upstate New York. When I do get back to Michigan, a lot of times it's Lions and Tigers. Most cases I'm there during the summer. So it is what it is. And I have not been down to LCA, but I've heard nothing but good things. So I'm glad you're able to get down there, especially with for your grandson's birthday. That sounds like a great time. Trim says, I'm definitely getting the vibes of the Going to Work Pistons and the Nasty Boy squad. Heck yeah, dude. So let's put this more into context. What does a victory like this mean? And we're talking about what is the Pistons' trajectory for the second half of the year. Right now, Detroit has a 14-4 record against teams of 500 or more. So they're not just beating bad teams. They're beating competitive teams in the NBA, playoff-type teams, showing that they can compete night in and night out. So I don't see them falling off because of a statistic like that. At the same time, Boston's 13-12 against teams over 500. So in comparing another elite team in the NBA to what the Pistons are doing, there really isn't a comparison. So I don't think this is a fluke at all. I really think the Pistons are legitimately one of the Eastern Conference's top squads right now. I think they are the top team in the Eastern Conference. They're the team to beat. And I think they have a legitimate shot at a title. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. Based on where the Pistons are at right now, do you believe they have a legitimate shot at an NBA title? Can they overcome the East with where they're at? And can they beat one of these quality West teams to actually win a championship? That might be the biggest obstacle. Yeah, Brent. So Cade was out that one. Duncan Robinson kept him in until the end. I like Duncan Robinson. I mean, there's where, little tweaks, little minor additions have sort of made the difference here this year. Trim says Pistons are going all the way. I mean, here's the thing for the Pistons. Defense wins. We know that. Defense wins in big games. Obviously, in the playoffs, it gets heightened even more. So that style of play should carry them as we get deeper into the season. We know how Cade is evolving. He's now an all-star, has been. He's now an all-star starter. This is his second all-star bid. But even on non-huge scoring nights, a night like this against Boston, he's able to control the game in a different way. Through the assist game, rebounds, defense. He doesn't necessarily have to always be scoring the basketball for this Pistons team to win. Maybe something we haven't necessarily seen from this team in the past. And when guys like Tobias Harris and Jalen Duren are pouring in the way they have been pouring in, I think that's where the help that Cade needs shows that they could win it all. And maybe they don't need an extra piece. But again, that's something I like to hear from you guys. Can the Pistons win a championship as they're currently constructed, or do they need to add a piece? Let's flip it over to the Red Wings. Got to touch on our Detroit Red Wings here before we get off our live. They're coming off their most recent victory over the Ottawa Senators, a 4-3 victory in overtime at LCA. So a lot of good times happening down in the Detroit sports scene, especially at LCA, Little Caesars Arena. Jesse says, Robinson as a Michigan man and now with Detroit is so special. It would be amazing for him to get that title. That would be a great scene. I agree. Trim wants to trade LeVert, and we're all good. I've heard some rumors, some mixtures. We'll see what happens here. February 5th, I think, is the trade deadline, so we'll see if the Pistons ultimately make a move. But going back to the Wings, they're coming off their most recent victory over the Ottawa Senators at home, 4-3. They were kind of in a hole early. Ottawa jumped out 2-0. But Detroit battled back. ASP got the Wings on the board. Lucas Raymond gets a goal. And then James Van Riemsdyk, holy smokes. Between the legs, top shelf. What a goal. And although Ottawa did bring it back to 3-3 to tie it up and bring it to overtime, Detroit gets their 6th win in their last 7 games, keeps the Dubs rolling as Alex DeBrincat, with just 36 seconds into the overtime, is able to end this hockey game 4-3. Goalie John Gibson, solid again, 19 saves. Not as fantastic as he's been in previous matchup, but he continues to win and continues to roll. That win lifts Detroit in the Atlantic Division. They're now tied with Tampa Bay, 30-16-4, 64 points, with both teams battling for a top spot in the division. Montreal is just a point back at 61. Boston, Buffalo close behind. Toronto is just a few points back, and the Red Wings have a game with the Maple Leafs upcoming on Wednesday night. So that's tomorrow night at Scotiabank Arena. Puck drop around 7 p.m. And this is an important one as far as the standings concerned. Maple Leafs trying to work their way up, and the Red Wings trying to hold on to where they're at in the division. So this should be great. Jesse says, down 2-0 and get that W in OT was amazing. That was a great comeback. I didn't get to watch that one from start to finish. That was during the NFL playoff game, so I had to kind of go in between. But yeah, that was a great victory for them to get. Cat coming up big in OT. That Van Riemsdyk goal, that is ridiculous. Trim says, Red Wings are about to sign Zach Werenski, former Michigan standout D-man, or Rasmus Anderson, Calgary All-Star D-man. I like it. What a guy in skill. I mean, that goal alone, that Riemsdyk, that was incredible. But ultimately, guys, we got Detroit sports rolling. We have huge topics with the Lions. We got the Pistons rolling into the second half of the season. We got the All-Star break coming up with Cade involved as a starter. A lot of good things in Pistons land. Red Wings, again, toying with our hearts as far as where they're at in the standings now. Can the Red Wings maintain this, or will they break our hearts as they make a push towards the playoffs? Jesse, I won't be going live for the game. I haven't really done that since last year with the Lions. I was going live every, Sunday, whatever game day they were playing for members only. It was fun. I might do it in the future. Let's say that. I haven't closed the door on it. I do make a large production of it. There's a lot of work that goes into it because I really like to bring a good experience to that. So if I do go back, I will post it on the channel here at Johnny Gaz Sports and how you guys can get there. I'd love to do that with, if we get closer to the Pistons playoffs, if the Red Wings get into the playoffs and we have some really important games coming up, then I could foresee, going live for these games. Brad Clark, how you doing, buddy? Welcome to the chat. It says, going back to the Lions, says, Petzing was in Minnesota with Rick Spielman for several years. Chris was heavily involved in the search. I heard that as well. And you got to feel good about that. Again, an internal investigation, if you will, but utilizing the resources you have. Obviously, Chris Spielman, trusted. And if he was involved, then you have to feel a little better about that. Detroit fan man, thank you for this. Says, and in Wings news, I never imagined running into. Apparently, the Grand Rapids Griffins are dominating the AHL. Development looking strong. So you got to feel good about that. Detroit fan man, I cannot sit here and tell you I am a Grand Rapids Griffins expert. So I'm going to take your word for it as a great thing for the Red Wings. I think so. Trim says the Wings are real. I hope you're right, buddy. They've kind of broken my heart the last couple seasons, but I am Red Wings fan at heart, and I will continue to support. Let's see what they can make happen here. What up, Lean? Good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you, man. Says, what up, Doe? So we are just past an hour. Actually, we're now 10 minutes past the hour, guys. I appreciate you so much. If you have not already, make sure to hit that like button on the stream. It is the best free way to help out the channel. Share the stream out to your friends and family, all of your feeds. Make sure we get as many people involved and have fun in the chat as we can. Again, we go live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Tuesdays, a heavy focus on Lions. Thursdays, a little more heavy on the Detroit sports scene, but we will hit on all the Detroit news and updates each and every Tuesday and Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We go live on Facebook and YouTube, but at Johnny Gaz Sports on any one of your socials, and you will find Detroit sports content. Thank you guys so much for being so heavily involved in the chat today. This is our best, by far, our best turnout for a live, the most chat we've ever had. It is thanks to you guys. I love this more than you know. You guys, I do not purposely put out clickbait. I do not allow ChatGPT to formulate my opinions or my content. I do not use AI and post that shit to my socials. I'll say it again. I do not allow ChatGPT to dictate my content. I do not copy and paste ChatGPT into Facebook content and pretend it is my own. This is all my original thought. My thoughts, my opinions, my fandom, my channel. And you guys are a part of it. The people involved, the positive people involved are a part of it. And I appreciate that very much. This is from the bottom of my heart because I love Detroit sports. I love the Lions. I love the Pistons. I love the Tigers. I love the Red Wings. I love the Spartans. I don't love the Wolverines, but I'm fine with them. We're fine with them. But you get what I'm saying. This is my creation and my stuff. Don't allow other people to tell you otherwise. Don't let fake content convince you or take you to a place you shouldn't go. Guys like Don't Know Grit, guys like Dan at Lions Talk Live, and there are a lot of other good Lions creators with a good head on their shoulders, creative minds, positive thinking people that want to give you good information. Follow those people. If it's not me, I'm not trying to convince you to follow me, but follow those people. Anybody can spew out what ChatGPT wants to tell you. Anyone can do that. Anybody. Anyone can do that. Not me. It won't happen here. You get my real stuff. You'll always get my real stuff. That's my promise to you guys. Thank you so much for joining me at Johnny Gaz Sports. I hope you'll come back and see me this Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll have updates to the Lions situation, Pistons games, Red Wings games, Tigers news, whatever's happening around Detroit sports. You can find it at Johnny Gaz Sports. I love you all. Peace out. Enjoy your night. Love you.